I refused to sign the birth certificate. That single sentence shattered the room more than any scream could. I was standing by the hospital bed, my wife cradling a newborn in her arms, while my mother and mother-in-law whispered blessings through their tears. Everyone expected me to step forward, to smile, to touch the child. But I didn't move. I stayed rooted in place, cold and steady, like a man standing at his own trial. A nurse walked in, cheerful, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Miller, I just need your signature here." She might as well have asked me to carve my own tombstone. I looked at her, then at Claire, the woman I once trusted with my entire life, and I said it flat, calm, unshaken. "I'll sign it after the DNA test proves that child is mine." The silence that followed was louder than thunder. Claire's mother dropped her bouquet, petals scattering across the sterile floor. My own mom froze, staring at me like she didn't recognize the son she had raised. Claire's head snapped toward me so quickly the baby stirred in her arms. Her lips trembled, eyes wide with betrayal, tears already spilling. I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. Because deep down, I knew the truth was uglier than their shock. Claire's whisper cracked through the silence. "Daniel, what are you saying? You think I cheated?" I met her eyes, steady as stone. "No," I said coldly. "I'm saying I know you did, and now everyone else knows too." This wasn't just a family celebration. It was the opening act of the storm that would rip every single thing in my life apart. Here's the part nobody saw coming. I didn't back down. I doubled down. Claire was shaking, whispering my name, like I had just pulled the fire alarm on our lives. My mom, Linda, stood frozen. Claire's mother, Renee, gripped the rail at the foot of the bed like the whole room tilted. "I'm not guessing," I said. "I'm certain. And since we're finished pretending, do you want to hear his name?" Claire blinked, pale as paper. "Whose name?" "The man you texted," I answered. "The one you begged to keep secret." I pulled a folded printout from my jacket and held it up for everyone to see. My hand was steady, hers shook. "Bryce Reed," I said. "Should I call him?" It landed like a slap. The baby whimpered. Claire held him tighter. Renee whispered, "Daniel, not here, please." But I didn't stop. I read the words aloud, every syllable like a hammer. "My husband can't ever know about you and me. I want nothing to do with you anymore." The bouquet slid to the floor. My mother sat down slowly, her face drained of strength. Claire's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then finally, "How did you get that?" "He gave it to me," I said. "Bryce sent it himself." Claire's whole body trembled. She sank into the chair, clutching the baby like he could shield her from the truth. Renee tried to step between us. "Daniel, the baby just got here. Don't do this now." I turned to her. Cruel isn't today. Cruel was every night she looked me in the eye and lied. Then I faced Claire. "So you did sleep with him?" She flinched so hard, the IV line rattled against the pole. There was no denial, no defense, just silence and broken breaths. My mom finally spoke, her voice thin but firm. "Danny, we don't even know if the baby isn't yours." "I've known about the affair for 4 months," I said. "Back in April, I got the first message. Screenshots, calls, hotel receipts, all of it. And I stayed quiet because she was pregnant. I wasn't going to shatter her stress and risk the child, even if he wasn't mine." The room sagged under the weight of it. I stepped closer, not to comfort, but to finish what I started. "If he's mine, I'll be his father. I'll protect him, raise him, give him everything I've got. But you and I nodded toward Claire, "we're over. And if he isn't mine," I added, voice flat and final, "I walk away and I don't come back." Claire broke down, clutching the baby as if he were the last piece of herself that hadn't already been torn away. Renee rushed to her side, whispering comfort, but I stayed where I was, cold steady, unflinching. My mom finally found her voice. "Daniel, stop. We don't even know if the child isn't yours yet." Renee nodded quickly, desperate. "Yes. What if you're wrong? What if this is your son?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shed a tear. I didn't even blink. "I've known the truth for months," I said quietly. Bryce gave me the proof himself. Screenshots, late-night calls, hotel bills. I didn't say a word, because she was pregnant. I wasn't going to crush her while she carried a child, even if he wasn't mine. Claire's head snapped up, eyes swollen with tears. "You knew," she whispered, broken. Renee's hands tightened on her daughter's shoulders. I nodded slowly. I stayed because I wanted that baby to come into the world in peace. I didn't want my anger to poison his first breath. But don't mistake that for forgiveness. Claire buried her face in the baby's blanket, shoulders shaking with sobs. I didn't move. I didn't reach out. I just stood there, a man who had already said goodbye in his heart. The room went silent again, thick and suffocating. Even the machines faded into background noise. I looked straight at Claire. "If he's mine, I'll raise him. I'll give him my name, my strength, my protection. But as for you," I let the words hang in the air like a blade. "We're finished. I'll file for divorce. You will no longer be my wife." Renee gasped. Claire whimpered. My mom sat there frozen, her hands gripping her lap so hard her knuckles went white. No shouting, no rage. Just the kind of quiet that ends things forever. The silence in that hospital room felt heavier than the walls themselves. My words weren't shouted, they were carved into stone. Claire rocked the baby like movement could turn back time, but I didn't move an inch. My mom, Linda, finally stood. Her face was pale, her jaw tight. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "The baby is innocent." I didn't answer. I knew she was right. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't lied. He hadn't destroyed our marriage. But my eyes stayed fixed on Claire because her betrayal poisoned everything. Renee tried again. "Daniel, please. This is your family. Don't throw it away." I turned toward her slowly. Family doesn't lie in hotel rooms. Family doesn't send secret texts. Family doesn't put a husband through hell and call it love. Claire whispered, broken, "Please, don't say that. Not here." But it was already said, already finished. I looked at her one last time. "If the test says he's mine, I'll raise him. But you," I shook my head, "you will never be my wife again." Renee gasped, covering her mouth. My mom looked down at the floor, silent now. And Claire just sat there, rocking the child, eyes lost, tears falling as if she finally understood she'd burned the bridge behind her. 2 days later, the envelope arrived. White, sealed, heavier than paper should ever feel. My hands didn't shake, but my chest did as I opened it. Typed letters, cold, clinical. Sample A, probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the words. I didn't shout, didn't curse, didn't smash a glass against the wall. I just sat there, still, like my soul had already known, and finally caught up. I drove to Renee's house that evening. The porch looked the same wind chimes, a tricycle leaning against the wall. Claire opened the door, her face lighting up with wild, fragile hope. "You came back," she whispered. "I knew it. I told Mom you still loved me." I raised a hand to stop her. "Where's your mother?" The smile collapsed. She stepped aside. Inside, Renee appeared from the hallway. Behind her, my mom stood holding the baby. "Look," my mom said, her voice breaking. "He has your eyes. Just hold him once, Daniel, please." I took a step back. My hand slid into my jacket. The envelope came out, the truth inside. I handed it to Renee. "Read it," I said. Her fingers trembled. She unfolded the paper, scanning the words. Her mouth went dry, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sample A, Probability of paternity, 0%. You are not the father. She collapsed into a chair. My mother's face froze, her arms still locked around the child. Claire didn't scream, didn't argue. She just stood there, pale and hollow, stripped of every lie. And I felt nothing. Nothing but the weight of certainty. Renee sat slumped in her chair, the paper still shaking in her hands. My mother stayed frozen, arms locked around the baby, her eyes scanning the letter again and again as if rereading could somehow change the truth. Claire didn't cry, didn't scream, she just stood hollow, like her soul had left her body. I looked at all three of them and spoke calmly. This ends here. Don't call me about her again. She's your daughter, Renee, but she's no longer my wife. I turned to my mother. You can visit her, comfort her, stay friends with Renee. I won't stop you, but don't ask me to pretend this didn't happen. Then I said the words that sealed it. Don't force your loyalty onto me while I'm cleaning up what she destroyed. I walked out of the house without another word. Didn't look back. Didn't even pause to breathe. The air outside felt colder than it should have, like even the night itself knew something sacred had been broken inside those walls. I took 3 steps down the walkway and stopped, because standing just outside was a nurse. She must have been there the whole time, silent, listening. Our eyes met. She didn't flinch. She didn't pity me. She just looked at me with something raw and human understanding. For the first time in months, I didn't feel insane. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt like a man who had been broken and finally seen. That night, the silence in my house was suffocating. Her things were gone, but the scent of her shampoo still clung to the bathroom. On the counter sat a single bottle of baby lotion, something I hadn't even noticed before. I poured myself a drink, sat on the edge of the couch, and let the quiet close in. Then, the phone rang. My mom's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a long second before answering. "Daniel," she said softly, almost careful. "I'm at Renee's. Claire needs both of us right now." I closed my eyes, jaw tight, saying nothing. "I've treated her like a daughter since the day you brought her home," she went on. "I can't just turn that off like a switch." Still, I said nothing. Then came the line that snapped the thread. "I just pray this child is yours. Maybe you can still save this marriage." My grip tightened on the phone. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just said flat, final. "The marriage is over. Even if the child were mine, I'm done with her." She tried again, voice cracking. "Daniel, please just listen." "No," I cut her off. "If you keep pushing for that, then consider your son dead." Silence. Then her voice, fragile. "I hear you." I ended the call. 2 days went by without a sound. No calls from my mother, no texts from Renee, no messages from Claire, just a house that creaked when it settled, and the hum of a fridge that suddenly felt too loud. I kept replaying that last line to my mom, the one that drew blood. I didn't take it back. I just carried it. I started boxing up what was left of Claire's life, in my rooms, sweaters, framed photos, the books she stacked on the nightstand like a wall against sleep. I labeled the cartons the way you label losses: closet, bathroom, miscellaneous. It didn't make it hurt less, it just made it organized. At 5:30, Renee texted, "I'll come by and pick up her things. No drama." Porch. 6-7 p.m., I replied. Nothing else. She showed at 6:15. No makeup, no speech. She lifted 2 boxes, set them in her trunk, came back for the third. On the last trip, she paused and kept her eyes on the paint of the door frame. "Whatever you think of me, I didn't raise her for this," she said. "I know," I answered. It was the only mercy I had to give. She nodded once and left. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at the table with a legal pad. The first line I wrote was a title, "Next Right Thing." Cancel the joint card. Change passwords. Move the last of her stuff. Don't text after dark. Keep going. A voicemail from my mom came through. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg. "I'm making stew," she said, voice thinner than I remembered. "There's a plate if you want it." I saved it. Didn't press play again. The next morning I met a lawyer named Harper. Her office smelled like paper and reheated coffee, and she spoke like someone who knew how to fold fire into straight lines. I slid the lab report across the desk. 0%, I said. She read it once, looked up. "Then you have no legal obligation to the child," she said. "We'll move for divorce, adultery, irretrievable breakdown. Keep the messages. Don't engage at night. Don't post. Don't rant. Judges like order, not noise." "What about the baby?" I asked. She didn't soften. "He's innocent," she said. "But the court reads paper, not feelings. You stay disciplined. That's how you win what can still be won." We went through keys, accounts, mail, property. She drew arrows, boxes, dates. "Last thing," she said, capping her pen. "Do not argue in doorways or hallways. If she shows up, you don't debate. You refer her to me." Back home, the house looked smaller, like the rooms had finally exhaled. I stacked the binders Harper gave me on the table until they made a spine, something I could lean on if I needed to. I washed 2 cups, dried them slow, put them away like ritual could be recovery. Night dropped early. I stood in the doorway of the spare room, the one that used to be ours, hand on the knob, then let it go. There's a kind of strength in leaving a door closed. I shut off every light except the one in the hall, not because I was afraid of the dark, but because I needed a small proof I could still choose the light. Tomorrow would be forms and signatures and more boxes. Tonight it was one quiet house, and a list that ended with a line underlined twice. Keep going. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It echoed when I walked, like even the walls wanted to remind me I was alone. I poured coffee, let it go cold, then poured it out. Every ritual felt hollow. Nights were worse. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling fan, waiting for exhaustion to drag me under. But sleep came slow, and when it did, it came sharp dreams of Claire's face, of my mother's silence, of that newborn cry that haunted the back of my mind. My phone lit up one night, Mom. I let it ring, then another, then finally answered on the third. "Danny," she said softly, "he's just a baby. He didn't ask for this." I closed my eyes. The gentleness in her voice was harder to hear than anger would have been. "Mom, stop," I said flat. "You want to see Claire? Then see her. But don't ask me to pretend." A pause, broken breathing. "You're still my son." "I know," I said, and hung up. The next morning, a message from Renee blinked on my screen. "Please, don't punish the child. He deserves better than this war." I typed one line and hit send. "Talk to your daughter. She built this war." At Harper's office, the divorce folder grew heavier. She pointed to highlighted lines in the text messages, circled hotel bills, clipped screenshots. "This is the spine of your case. Facts, not feelings." "What if she drags the baby into it?" I asked. "Then the court sees her, not you," Harper answered. "Stay disciplined. Don't give them a reason to call you unstable." Her voice cut through the fog like steel. Back home, I stacked every file on the table until the wood creaked. I ran my hand across the paper, cold proof of what love had rotted into. No more arguments, no more begging, just evidence and signatures. That night I stood by the dark window, my reflection staring back like a stranger. For months I thought I was fighting for Claire, for marriage, for family, but staring at that glass, I knew the truth. I wasn't fighting for her anymore. I was fighting for myself, for the right to end this on my own terms. The calendar on the fridge stared back at me, a circle drawn in red around the first court date. Just seeing it tightened my chest. I'd faced betrayal, lies, and silence, but a courtroom was a different battlefield. Harper spread the documents across her desk like a general laying out a map. "We're filing under adultery, irretrievable breakdown. Clean, straightforward. But Claire's lawyer will push back hard. Expect her to paint you as cold, unstable, even dangerous. I nodded, jaw locked. I can take it. She leaned forward. Don't just take it. Stay calm. Judges reward discipline, not volume. Back home, I rehearsed answers in my head. Why didn't you leave earlier? Because she was pregnant. Why didn't you forgive her? Because trust is already dead. I wasn't practicing for them. I was practicing for myself, to hear my own voice steady when the weight tried to crush it. One evening, Mom called again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. Her voice cracked through the speaker. I know you're angry, but don't lose yourself in it. You're still the man I raised. I pressed delete before she finished. I couldn't carry her hope anymore. It felt heavier than Claire's betrayal. Renee left a box on my porch. Inside was a stack of baby clothes folded tight. On top, a note. He'll outgrow these fast. Maybe you can bring them back someday. I carried the box straight to the trash bin. The lid slammed like punctuation. Late that night, I sat at the kitchen table under the weak light. The divorce papers lay open in front of me. I signed where Harper had marked with sticky tabs. My signature looked foreign, like it belonged to another man. I closed the folder, leaned back, and whispered into the quiet. This isn't about saving anything anymore. This is about ending it. The silence didn't answer. But for the first time, it didn't scare me either. The courthouse smelled of old wood and disinfectant. Too clean, too polished, like pain wasn't allowed to echo off its walls. I sat at the respondent's table, hands flat, back straight, Harper at my side. Across the aisle sat Claire. She didn't look at me. She just stared down at her hands, knuckles white against the folder her lawyer had prepped. The judge entered, robe flowing, voice clipped and sharp. We're here to hear Miller versus Miller. Grounds, adultery, irretrievable breakdown. His gavel cracked, and the air seemed to freeze. Claire's lawyer stood first, words slick as oil. Your Honor, the respondent is not the biological father of the child in question. He has no legal tie. Furthermore, his behavior cold, dismissive, alienating shows clear emotional instability. We ask that custody remain with the mother, and that this court recognize her parental rights above all else. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they were rehearsed to sound that way. Harper rose calmly, sliding documents onto the bench. Your Honor, Exhibit A, confirmed adultery through text messages, hotel records, and corroborating statements. Exhibit B, medical record showing my client supported his wife through pregnancy, despite knowledge of infidelity. Exhibit C, evidence of financial stability and a consistent household environment. Her tone was steady, like each word was a nail locking the coffin. The judge scanned the papers, silent for what felt like hours. My chest tightened. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to remember Harper's words. Judges reward discipline, not noise. Finally, he spoke. Mr. Miller, do you wish to say anything? My throat felt dry as sandpaper. I stood anyway. I'm not here to argue biology, I said. I'm here because marriage means trust. That trust was broken. I stood by through pregnancy because I believed no child should be born into war. But that does not mean I will stay chained to lies. Silence fell, thicker than any gavel strike. Claire shifted in her seat, eyes glistening, but she didn't speak. The judge nodded once. We'll recess and reconvene tomorrow. The gavel hit, and the room exhaled all at once. I sat down slowly, feeling every stare in the courtroom burn into my back. For the first time, it wasn't anger that filled me. It was clarity. This wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about freedom. The second day in court felt heavier than the first. Same benches, same pale lights, but the air carried a charge, like everyone knew something was about to break. I sat at the table with Harper, hands folded tight, watching the door. Claire was already there, her lawyer whispering sharp instructions into her ear. She didn't look at me once. The judge called us to order. Harper rose, stating our case with precision, every point measured like a metronome. Then Claire's lawyer launched into his script again, painting me as a bitter man clinging to dignity he didn't deserve. I barely heard him. My eyes stayed fixed on the bench, waiting for the gavel to drop. Then a voice cut through the room. "I'd like to say something." Heads turned. Renee was standing in the back, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady. The judge frowned. "Ma'am, are you a listed witness?" "No, Your Honor," she said, "but I am the child's grandmother, and I believe the truth matters here." The judge hesitated, then motioned her forward. The oath was read. Renee raised her hand and swore. She turned, not to the judge first, but to her daughter. "Claire," she said quietly, "you gave birth to him, but you didn't give him a home. Daniel did. You lied. You betrayed. And still he stayed long enough to protect that baby from the storm you created." Claire's face crumpled. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The courtroom stilled. Renee faced the judge. "If this court wants to know who has acted like a father, look at Daniel. He stayed through pregnancy, knowing the truth. He protected a child who wasn't even his. That's what love looks like, even when it's undeserved." Her words dropped like a stone in water, rippling through every row. Even Harper blinked, momentarily caught off guard. I sat frozen, breath shallow. Renee could have defended her daughter, could have twisted the knife deeper into me. Instead, she'd spoken truth, the kind that cost her everything. Claire whispered, broken, "Mom, stop." But Renee didn't shay. She looked at me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "You had every reason to destroy her, Daniel, but instead you raised her son higher than both of you. That's what a father island." The judge leaned forward, voice firm. "Mrs. Jensen, thank you. That will be noted." Renee nodded once and returned to her seat. She didn't look at Claire. She didn't need to. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel like I was the one on trial. I felt like the truth finally had its day. And in that truth, I saw the finish line. Not victory, not revenge, just freedom. The gavel came down one last time, and just like that, it was over. Divorce granted. No fireworks, no cheers, just a signature and silence. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter and heavier at the same time, like chains had been cut but scars were still burning. Outside, the air felt raw, too bright for the weight in my chest. Reporters weren't there, no crowd, just ordinary people passing by, unaware that my entire life had just been buried under a stamp and a file number. Renee was waiting near the steps. She didn't approach, didn't call out, just stood there with a cardboard box in her arms. Baby clothes, a couple of Claire's old books, framed photos I hadn't bothered to pack. She tried to hand it to me. "I thought you might want these," she said softly. I looked at the box, then back at her. "Keep them. They belong to your daughter." Her eyes glistened, but she nodded. For the first time, there was no fight in her, no attempt to change my mind, just quiet acceptance. When I got home, the house felt different. Not empty anymore, just mine. The papers were filed, the bridge burned, the story closed. I opened a bottle, sat at the table, and tried to let the silence settle as something permanent. That's when I saw it. A plain manila envelope on the counter. My name written in my mother's handwriting. Daniel. My chest tightened. I hadn't noticed it before, maybe left behind when she'd last been over. I sat down, careful, like it might break if I rushed. Inside was a folded letter, the paper worn soft at the edges. "Son," it began, "if you're reading this, it means the storm has passed. I always knew you were stronger than you believed. You stood when it would have been easier to collapse. You chose truth when lies offered comfort. I am proud of you. I wasn't the perfect mother, but I tried to raise a man who could carry his own name with honor. That's who you are, Daniel. Don't let betrayal define you. Let survival shape you. Always faithful, Mom." I folded the letter back with shaking hands. For the first time in months, I felt something break inside, not anger, not grief, but release. I wasn't fighting Claire anymore. I wasn't fighting the court. I wasn't even fighting myself. I was free. The days after the court ruling didn't feel like triumph. They felt like aftershocks. I woke up in a quiet house, made coffee for one, went to work, came back, repeated. The world had moved on, but my body still carried the weight of battles already fought. I sold the old bed, boxed up what little was left of Claire's, scrubbed the smell of her shampoo from the bathroom tiles. Every room became neutral ground. Again, no ghosts, no shadows, just empty walls waiting for a new story. But healing wasn't clean. Some nights I still poured 2 glasses out of habit. Some mornings I reached for the baby lotion bottle she'd left behind, only to throw it across the room in disgust. Grief has a way of hiding in rituals, in muscle memory. I didn't answer calls from Renee. Her number flashed more than once, always late, always desperate. I knew what she wanted, to talk about the baby, to beg me to reconsider. But I had nothing left to give. Mom checked in too, sometimes with silence, sometimes with words. "Daniel," she said one evening, "don't confuse surviving with living." I didn't answer, just sat at the kitchen table with her letter folded neatly beside me. It wasn't advice I needed, it was time. Work became my anchor. Extra hours, extra shifts, anything to keep my mind from circling the drain. Evenings I filled with runs through the neighborhood, lungs burning, legs screaming, proving to myself I could still move forward. One Friday, Harper called. "Papers are finalized. Everything's closed." Her voice carried no drama, just fact. "Good," I said simply. No celebration, no relief, just acknowledgement. When the call ended, I sat in the silence again. This time, though, it didn't suffocate. It just existed, like a quiet roommate. I looked at Mom's letter, at the bare walls, at the empty glass in my hand. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for Claire to come back, or for apologies that would never come. I was waiting for myself. The man I'd been was gone. But the man I was becoming, he was still standing, still breathing, and finally ready to start living. My mother died on a Tuesday before sunrise. No hospital, no monitors, just sleep that didn't turn back into morning. The call came early and simple, and by the time I reached her house, the kettle was still half full on the stove, the window cracked to let in the cool. I stood in her doorway longer than I should have, trying to memorize the shape of quiet. The undertaker spoke in practical sentences. I nodded in practical answers. We chose the plain casket, the kind my mother would have picked herself. At the service, hands found my shoulders, lips said sorry for your loss, and I said thank you for coming until the words felt like paper in my mouth. I didn't cry. I kept my back straight. She would have wanted that. After everyone left, I washed the paper cups, wiped the counter twice, and sat at her kitchen table with the blinds half open. Grief doesn't knock. It walks in like it owns the place and sits where your mother used to sit. I waited it out. When it didn't move, I stood and began to clean. Drawers, closets, the hallway chest that stuck on the second pull. In her bedroom, the lavender candle was down to the metal. I lifted the pillow and found a small leather journal, the cover rubbed smooth. Her handwriting filled the first pages, lists, dates, grocery reminders. Then the lines began to sharpen. 2091 Kuwait, supply runs, too close to the heat. Renee still, the steadiest hands I know. Semper, F.I. I flipped a photo out from the back. 2 young women in marine uniforms, faces set, shoulders squared. My mother and Renee, on the reverse, in blue ink, always faithful, sisters first. I sat on the edge of the bed and let that sink in. They weren't just in-laws. They were battle sisters before any of this. It didn't excuse anything, but it explained the way Renee stood near us even when everything broke. Farther in, tucked like a secret, was a manila envelope with my name on it, Daniel. Underneath, one line in her steady hand, "For when the battle is over." I held it a long time before I opened it. Inside, no speeches, no pages, just a single card with a name and number, Kelly Morgan. Below it, my mother had written, "Marine widow, kind, 1 coffee, that's all." There was a second note, smaller. "Son, you don't owe the world your heart, but if you choose to open it again, do it because you are strong, not because you are lonely. Mom." I set the card on the nightstand and stared at it until the room blurred. I wasn't ready. Not tonight. I slid the journal back under the pillow, the way I found it, and turned off the light. In the doorway I stopped, the house breathing around me like it was trying to learn my rhythm. Grief would come in waves. I knew that now. But so would the shoreline. And somewhere past this dark, there was a coffee I might actually say yes to. Not because I needed saving. Because my mother believed I was already saved. Grief doesn't ask permission. It shows up with the sunrise and leaves with the night, but it never really goes. The house felt different without Mom in it. Not empty, just unfinished, like a story cut short. I kept coming back, sorting her things, finding scraps of the woman I thought I knew, and discovering pieces I never imagined. Her journal became my map. Some pages were soft with years, others sharp like they had been written in a rush. Military jargon I barely understood. Names of towns I had to look up. Notes about convoys, heat, and the sound of bombs in the distance. And over, Renee's name, Semper Fi, always faithful. One entry from 1991 stopped me cold. Supply truck took fire. Renee kept the wheel steady while I changed the tire under tracer fire. We laughed after. Always faithful, even when it feels like the world is burning. I sat there, staring at the handwriting, realizing my mother and Renee weren't just family friends. They were sisters forged in fire, long before marriage bound our families together. No wonder Renee clung so hard when everything else shattered. Then came a section from 1999. Different tone, sharper, CIA notations, coded lines, references to surveillance and deep cover. I almost closed it, almost refused to believe it, but the photo I'd found earlier confirmed it. Mom and Renee, suits at Langley, 2 women who had seen more shadows than I would ever understand. At the bottom of the page, in smaller handwriting, "One day Daniel will learn. Not everything, just enough to know I was always watching, always protecting." It hit me harder than the funeral, harder than the silence at her grave. My mother wasn't just a woman who raised me, she was a soldier, a guardian, a protector who had lived 2 lives, so I could live 1. I closed the journal carefully, almost reverently, and slid it back under the pillow. My chest ached. But it wasn't just grief anymore. It was pride, and something heavier responsibility. Because if she could face war, betrayal, and secrets, then I could face the ruins of a broken marriage and rebuild. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It was mine to carry forward. And for the first time since the hospital, I felt ready to take a step that wasn't backward. The card with her name sat on my nightstand for a week. Kelly Morgan, Marine widow, 1 coffee, that's all. My mother's handwriting stared at me every morning when I opened my eyes, and every night before I turned off the light, I tried to ignore it, told myself I wasn't ready. But one evening, after pacing the house too many times, I dialed the number. Her voice answered steady, warm. Not soft, not forced, just real. "Hello. This is Daniel Miller," I said. "My mother may have left you my number." Silence for a beat, then a laugh, low and surprised. "Linda Miller," she said, almost fondly. That woman was relentless. I couldn't help but smile. Yeah, that sounds like her. We agreed to meet the next day. A small cafe outside town, neutral ground. I almost turned the car around twice before I pulled into the lot. She was already there, sitting by the window. Jeans, boots, a leather jacket. No makeup, no pretending. She looked up when I walked in, and I knew this wasn't about first impressions. It was about honesty. We didn't flirt. We didn't pretend it was a date. We talked about deployments, about funerals, about silence, and how it can both heal and kill you. She told me about her husband, an IED in Kandahar. No warning. I told her about Claire, about the hospital, about the paper that said 0%. She didn't pity me. She just listened. When the conversation lulled, I thought it was over. But then she looked me in the eye and said, "You don't look like a man searching for love." I nodded. "I'm not." She smiled faintly. "Good, because I'm not a woman begging for it." We both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from the stomach, not the throat. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like pretending. It felt like air after drowning. When I left the cafe, the world didn't look fixed, but it looked possible. My mother hadn't been wrong. One coffee was enough to remind me I was still alive. Driving home, I caught myself glancing at the passenger seat. Empty, but not heavy anymore. And for the first time since the hospital, the silence didn't hurt. It held space. Space for something new. I didn't plan it. I just got in the car and drove to Renee's house with Mom's journal on the passenger seat. The wind chimes were still there. The porch still needed paint. I stood on the step a full minute before I knocked. Renee opened the door. No makeup, no armor, just tired eyes that had watched a family break. She didn't speak. She just stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled like laundry and formula. A small bassinet sat by the window, a blanket rising and falling with a tiny breath. Claire was in the hallway, thinner, quieter. For a second, the old life tried to speak through my chest. I didn't let it. "I'm not here for us," I said. "I'm here for him." Her mouth trembled. She nodded and looked away. I walked to the bassinet and looked down. Big eyes blinked up at me, like the world had only just started making sense. My hands shook, not from fear, from the weight of the promise I was about to make. I slid my palms under him and lifted. He was warm and unafraid. "I couldn't save our marriage," I said softly, "to no one and everyone. But I can save what's left of the truth." I looked at Renee. "I'll do the paperwork. I'll do it right. I don't want a war. I want him to have peace." Renee's hand covered her mouth. She nodded through tears she didn't wipe away. Weeks turned into a rhythm. Forms, signatures, quiet visits that became longer stays. I learned bottles and burp cloths and the art of walking the floor at 2 a.m. We didn't talk much about the past. We talked about nap schedules and pediatricians. The future was small and holy and enough. When the papers were final, I held him at the clerk's counter and whispered his name, Caleb Miller. It felt new and right, like a door closing and another one opening at the same time. Only then did I call Kelly. I told her the truth in one breath, no edits, no polish. She listened the way soldiers do, to the pain and the pride, without separating them. "Do you want company?" she asked. "Or do you want help?" "Help," I said. "Good," she answered. "I make excellent pancakes." It wasn't instant. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest. She showed up with groceries and patience. Caleb studied her, solemn and curious, then reached for her finger like he'd been saving that move for the right day. She didn't try to be anything she wasn't. She just stayed. And staying was everything. Months later, I found a drawing on the table, 3 stick figures, a tall man, a woman with a cape, and a kid with a dinosaur shirt. Above them, in crooked letters, "My Forever Team." In the corner, small and fierce, "Miller Family, we don't leave." I framed it and hung it on the fridge dead center. Every time I pass it, I remember the road here, betrayal, paper, courtrooms, my mother's faith, and a promise I chose to keep. Because love isn't blood or law. It's who shows up and stays. And we don't leave.